and welcome into this week's book club episode of Breaking Down Bloodline, where we read this novel, this wonderful novel by Claudia Gray. This is the penultimate episode, so if you don't know what the series is, boy, have you joined at a great time. You can actually go ahead and click here and it'll take you back to the beginning of the series. But basically, we've been going through this book a couple of chapters at a time, digging into the nitty-gritty. And we are almost done with the book, which is amazing, because it was my goal for a long time to get us through the Aftermath trilogy, as well as this book, in time for The Rise of Skywalker, and we're gonna do it. So I'm so pumped to continue to talk about this story with you guys. So let us dive into Chapter 28. I actually want to open Chapter 28 doing a thing I don't often do, which is read right out of the book, but this passage is so amazing. Like, I think this really captures what's going on right now in Leia's life. So it's Leia, and she is with Han at the beginning of this chapter, and she says, "Everything else I had ever done, everything I had ever been, was erased in an instant." Leia struggled to find the words. People who had fought beside me in the war, or had served beside me for years in the Senate, they didn't even see me as myself any longer. All I'll ever be to them now is Darth Vader's daughter. That really just kind of sums it all up, what this book is about. This book starts as a journey with Leia to learn who she is as a senator, and potentially see her rise to power. Any other book, this would be a book about how Princess Leia becomes first senator or chancellor or what have you. And that's certainly what happened in Legends. Leia was the chancellor for a time, and it would be the easy thing to expect. But that's not the way the story goes. And we probably knew that based off of seeing The Force Awakens, but with the time in between, we didn't necessarily know that. Instead of being a book about a rise to political power, this is a book about a fall from grace. And it's kind of a rare falling from grace because it's not really Leia's fault. Maybe you can make an argument that she should have been forthright about her identity. She was in Legends. Regardless, on the Legends versus canon debate, which I think is irrelevant here, I am kind of curious what you guys think. Did she make the right call keeping it a secret all these years? Would it have been better for her to tell everyone? Would it have been better for her to tell a select few? Should it have mattered to her being a first senator? It's fascinating to kind of see this kind of well-known story that goes this other way in terms of you expect a rise to power, but also this well-known story of this fall from grace. But it's not, she made a mistake when she was young, or she said the wrong thing, or voted the wrong way, or something, or had her own deep dark past, but it's the shadow of the deep dark past of her father that she never knew that causes her fall. It's interesting from the perspective of Vader and his actions, that his actions continue to hold a consequence after his redemption to Anakin and after his death. It's easy to think that Vader kind of stops when Vader stopped being Vader, but the lives he hurt would continue on. I mean, we see that in Ransolem's life, Castorfo's life, and we see that just in the state of the galaxy in general. But the utter tragedy of the sins of the father weighing upon the daughter, especially in a way where she seems far more tainted than Luke, though Luke has also kind of pulled away from the public eye. It also helps to bring to the forefront Vader's shadow in the sequel trilogy. It's easy for a lot of people, and a lot of people did, to watch The Force Awakens and see Kylo as a Vader fanboy. That was a criticism of his character that I have been an ardent dismisser of for a long time. It makes sense that he would idolize his grandfather. How many kids grow up idolizing their grandfather? It really helps to show that Vader, that Anakin, is so critical to the galaxy that legacy lives on, and that people have to then inherit that legacy. There's a line, because I make everything about Yoda, there's a line in Empire, once you start down the dark path, forever will dominate your destiny. And it's a line that's easy to think ends up being not true, because Anakin is redeemed, right? He does end up on the path of the light. Darkness didn't dominate his destiny, but did it, he could have died redeemed, and some people don't think he was, but I'm sorry. Force Ghost, I'm going with with the text evidence. If you simply just don't agree with it, that's fine. But the idea that he could have gone to the light, but maybe the dark side stays with him, that ultimately he can be redeemed, the Force can forgive him, regardless of whether or not the galaxy could, but that never changes his legacy. You know, maybe it's not that forever will the dark side dominate your destiny, but maybe forever will it dominate your legacy. And that your legacy will always be viewed in the context of the darkness you chose to have around you, either as something that you overcame or something that continues to overshadow you if you never have the chance to atone for the things you were redeemed from. None of that really has anything to do with the book per se, but I think it helps to contextualize that. And I think that is an important thing to think about in the sequel trilogy, looking at Leia, looking at Luke, looking at Ben / Kylo. And a good thing to keep in mind going into The Rise of Skywalker, because while I do not yet know what the title means something, and the Skywalker family has always been a massive burden on the universe. But that's just the first couple of sentences in this couple of chapters, so let us continue on. I love that passage, and I love this whole conversation that Leia and Han have. I've talked about how in this book it's really fun to get to know Leia outside of the context of Han, outside of the context of her brother, even outside the context of her son, even though knowing more about their relationship is something I really want at this point, but something we are starting to get, and something I think we'll get more of post Rise of Skywalker. But to kind of get to know Leia as a person, and that these relationships are important to her, but they're not all of her. But that said, after an entire book of seeing her so isolated from the people that mean the most to her, it's really nice at the end of the book to have a scene with her and her husband, and to have a chance to kind of see Han and Leia together when it was good, because we see them in The Force Awakens and it's after things got bad. And they even mentioned that some of it was pretty good. And we get to see the some of it that was pretty good, and I really like that. I love Han's off-puttedness at Casterfo. Like, Leia is trying to justify him, and Han's like, no, he sounds terrible. He's very dismissive of him and the others. I love Han's response. We're like, yeah, everyone came and asked me about it after they found out, and they thought I didn't know, and I told them I knew, and I didn't want to hear about, he was just so gruff about it, so Han about it. And then Leia has a line, one of the best things about Han was that he always boiled everything down to the essentials and disregarded the rest, which is both a great quality and a potentially troubling quality, but it works really well with Leia, and it shows how they are two people who are such opposites, but when they work together, they fill in each other's weaknesses. Han's strengths are Leia's weaknesses, Leia's strengths are Han's weaknesses, and that can make for a very volatile relationship, such as we see so often with them on screen, but when channeled right, and directed right, can be a very powerful relationship. And so it was really nice. Even then, Han says back to her, not even you can save the whole galaxy before breakfast. Which is not meant to be dismissive of her at all, but rather to say, hey, relax, you've earned one night to be you, to take a deep breath and rest. So they have these nice moments together where he consoles her, tells her, it's okay if you've lost all this political power, you wanted to leave anyway. And then we go to Carisi and Hedrassian, which is decidedly not functional relationship, and they're having a talk about how the Amaxians are basically gone. There's a few that made it, obviously their leader being one of them, but they were largely destroyed on the inadvertent attack on Zemensko. They blame each other, Hedrassian and Carisi. Carisi saying that you overstepped, you should never have done the napkin bombing, you were not supposed to make this big thing, that's what started all of this investigation and the serious investigation, and Hedrassian's like, you're the ones that are refusing to move and refusing to act, and that's what's causing the problem. At the end of it all, Carisi's like, nope, we're cutting ties, you're done, we're not going to do this, and Hedrassian's like, no, you're going to regret this because you're going to want soldiers someday. One of the most interesting things really in this passage is a shout out to Brendel Hux, who some of you who, if you've read the Aftermath trilogy and or were with us on the Aftermath journey adventure we were on before, know of Brendel. Brendel, of course, is from the same planet as Carisi, which I had not fully connected. As soon as she said that, I was like, oh yeah, that's right, I'd forgotten about that fact. And talks about how he'd kind of disappeared, and of course we know where he disappeared too if you've read the Aftermath books. If you have not, I highly recommend doing so. Empire's End is especially, I love all three books, but Empire's End especially is a wonderful novel with a lot of really good setup for the sequel trilogy. Then we go to Casterfo. Casterfo wants to make up for his fame by using it, right? He didn't out Leia and her secret for the sake of power, but he got it anyway, so now he's like, well, if I got this power, I should use it. He also realizes that it was kind of a mistake to call Leia out the way he did. He doesn't feel bad for saying the truth. He's come to terms with the fact that, you know, Han, Ben, a few of the others who are affected by this didn't really deserve being outed so fast. And that regardless of what he thought Leia deserved, they at least deserve better. And he should have at least given Leia a chance to say this herself. And he's thinking about all this while he's on an appropriations committee, and that he's trying to get in on some of these other committees, and he sees that there's this guy who wants to up military power, and he wants to up the funding for military power and send it to largely centrist worlds. Now, Casterfo cannot understand why. We, at this point, are like, oh gosh, what is he doing? Because we know that there's a lot, maybe not all, I think to the extent that Casterfo is not a part of the conspiracy, it's not all centrist worlds, but that there's a large contingent of centrist worlds that are now starting to form the First Order, and we're like, oh snap, they want money, so they can start this civil war, basically. It is at this point that he hears that Leia is trying to speak before the Senate, and she, of course, dramatically needs one more vote to have a quorum so that she can speak in front of everybody. He decides to vote in her favor so that she can speak, which comes to the surprise of many, including Leia. You know, she feels more at peace now. We go to her, and she's more at peace with her findings. She's more at peace at what happened. She was worried that when she got the quorum that things were going to happen and it was all going to get weird and awkward, and it didn't. So she's having this night, dining in night with Han, and as she's feeling better, she lets him return to the race. That he has left this thing that he'd been doing to come be with her, and comments that, like, Han would have stayed with her. Han would have stayed with her and did whatever he had to do to support her because that's how much he loves her, but she described it as like clipping a bird's wings. And this kind of goes back to the opposite things. Like Leia, the opposite thing with the couple that I was mentioning, Leia is always the person who's going to be worried about duty, and because of it, always kind of be planted. And Han is always going to be the free spirit. And the two of them together really bring out something better in each other, but aren't always happy in the same environment, which is why Leia did want to go and join him to begin with. So again, it was just another nice scene of them seeming really close. And that takes us to chapter 29. Leia goes to a party. She's invited to a party. She's happy to kind of be involved. Visley is leading her around saying like, hey, she's my friend, I don't want to hear anything about it, and it's going mostly cordial. Leia decides to just be trollish, and she goes in this all-black dress to play on everybody thinking that she's like Vader. And what I like is that her two friends, the one hosting the party and Gar, know that she's doing it to be trollish, and Leia kind of falling on a morbid sense of humor to help her get through the night. She starts to speak to Gar one-on-one, but then it is when she discovers this whole party is to celebrate his candidacy as first senator, which she didn't know about. And this tells her a couple of things. One, she is not in the inner circle. She doesn't have power anymore. Two, is also because she was out on a mission instead of potentially being around to be in these meetings, but she probably wouldn't have been in it anyway. And this is the first time where she really, really feels her loss of power and influence. She describes how she never craved these things for their own sake. You know, she's so used to having them, and to have it as something she can't just call upon. She's starting to feel that absence. And it's probably stronger because she's feeling it while still being in the Senate, as opposed to leaving the Senate and going off into something entirely new, where she probably still would have had clout and influence if she came back because of retirement. So this is her kind of realizing that. But what becomes even more is she talks to Gar, and she's like, Gar, this is great. You're going to make a great first senator, and you'll be able to achieve so much. And he's like, no, I'm not going to achieve anything. I think having a first senator is stupid, so I'm not going to do anything to prove that we shouldn't have a first senator. And he basically walks into it with a total defeatist attitude, which kind of shocked me the first time I read the book, because he was played up as this really nice, like, even from the very first chapter when we're meeting everybody, he's so warm, and you really want to believe in him. And then for him to be like this, but it also makes total sense to his character. At the end of the day, He's a populist. And it's sad, and it shows the really sad state of affairs, and Leia has this overwhelming sense of doom because of it. Because basically you have the populists who so much don't want a government that they will intentionally do things to cause the government to fail to prove their own point. But then you have the centrists, who we know are plotting to take over the galaxy. Leia doesn't even necessarily know that yet, but she knows that they're dangerous and that they so idolize the Empire it could bring the Empire back. And this is what the galaxy is stuck with. People who either want to bring back days of authoritarianism that people fear will lead to another empire, and people who literally would just rather have anarchy. And it's such intense extremes. And what's terrifying about this is that it's not like, it doesn't seem, at least the book doesn't play it off, like there's a couple of extremes that are just really, really loud, but everybody else is like, okay guys, we gotta get our act together. But that the Senate is almost all extremes. The closest thing to a moderate, besides Leia, is Casterfo, who is not a moderate. He's just simply willing to listen to somebody else. It really shows the dangers of extreme choices in government, which I will not talk about on Star Wars channel, but I have so many thoughts on. But it brings Leia to this realization that the New Republic is in a heck of a lot of trouble, and there's just nothing she can do about it anymore. But it also kind of leads me to question a few things. I wonder how much the populist senators would have ever been behind her as first senator. That would she have become first senator, assuming she won, which she probably would have, would they have backed her at all? Or would they have seen it as a betrayal that she would have tried to make the title useful, that she would have tried to achieve things and change things? Or would they have turned on her even still? Would the centrists have even bothered, considering how many of them we know to be corrupt? You know, it's easy to look at this and see Leia as being fallen from grace and losing this power, but how miserable would she have been as first senator? Like, if this is what the populists want, she wouldn't have followed it, and she probably would have lost their support. And it kind of comes back to a question I think I addressed several videos ago, where it's so odd to me that Leia is a populist, because I feel like she does so much want the government to be functional. She just doesn't want or I should say a galactic government, not the government in general, but like a galactic government over a planetary government. She does so badly want that to be under control, but she also wants things done. Like, it's not that she doesn't like government or doesn't like the process, but she's afraid of it becoming another empire. And it puts her in a very strange place politically. And I really kind of wonder, as much as this is horrible, and as much as she's lost all influence, and as much as she is disgraced, is it not also maybe a bit of a rescue that she doesn't fall into this position? You know, it would have been better if she could have just simply not run for first senator and have this never have happened. I just don't know how happy she would have been in the role. From here, we go to Leia presenting it to the Senate. Leia is dressed in a gown similar to the one she wore during the medal ceremony in the throne room in A New Hope. She does for comfort. She talks about how people might not really know that that's what she's doing, but she is. And the meeting doesn't go great. You know, she's expecting boos and jeers, and all she gets is silence, until she suggests that the napkin bombing was the fault of the Amaxines as this paramilitary group, and that's what sets the Senate off. Not the crime syndicate, not the paramilitary group, but the idea that the populists can't blame the centrists for it, even though they can, and the centrists can't blame the populists for it. And that's why they're so mad. That not that this group did it, but that they can't have their conspiracies. Now, we are understanding that through Leia's POV, and her point of view may be incorrect or bitter or biased, but I don't see any reason to think that. It's just important to note that we don't really know that, we just only know that through Leia's narration. But that's really what the Senate can't get past. Like, they don't really care that there was, like, they get silent again when she's like, this is a group of people that is coming out of the New Republic and we have to be careful. But really, they just don't know what to do with it. And they're not thinking about what's best for the New Republic. They're thinking about what's best for their party. And it shows more of the conflict that they're trying to deal with. It's just crazy to me that they so badly want to believe that a different political party, as a part of the government, wants to, like, is responsible for bombing a Senate building. But they also don't want to believe that there's an internal power struggle within the New Republic. Like, they so badly want to believe that it was their political opponents who bombed where they work, but they don't want to believe that there's a civil war coming. And that dissonance is so strange to me, because why wouldn't it ever be both? But it's this point that Casterfo speaks up. We see this from the perspective of Lady Carisi, but Casterfo goes and backs Leia up in the Senate. He's like, hey, you may remember, I started this investigation with her, even though I didn't go to the last place with her. I can give you all of this data and all of this information from all the other places, and I've been to their base on Daxon 4, and I can corroborate so much of what she's saying. And again, the Senate doesn't know what to do with this. And Leia and Casterfo have this moment where Leia's kind of looking at him with respect, for sticking up for her, and really for the mission, more for her. And Carisi notes that Casterfo gives her a bow. And it's probably not a bow, she's the princess, but just like a, hey, like a point of respect. And Carisi's like, he never bowed to me, and I also have a title, so of course she's saying it because she's Princess Leia. It's probably, I don't know this for a fact, but that's probably not why Casterfo did it. And that sets Carisi off, and she feels so betrayed. She's like, I gave you this point where you could be powerful. We were going to groom you into the group, and now you're probably going to be this rogue centrist, and we can't have that. Which again leads me to believe that it is not all of the centrists, because why would he need grooming? Like, why would he even be there? But again, it obviously has to be enough that, I would even believe a majority of, for it to be as big as it is. But the scary thing we're left with is that Carisi says she's really good at tying up loose ends. And if I can only imagine that you guys have finished this book, because I feel like leaving you with just 2 chapters to go is probably cruel, but in the event you haven't, I won't say what happens next. But Carisi is really good at tying up loose ends. So that's where we're going to leave the story for today. Next week, we're going to finish the book. So that's chapters 30 and 31, but we're going to finish the book, which is so exciting. Right now, the 2 books that we're looking at most likely for when this starts up again next year is Catalyst and Dark Disciple. Again, if you think of anything, let me know. I'm also kind of reserving the right, I probably won't announce what book we're doing next week, because I'm going to be really honest with you guys, I want to see The Rise of Skywalker before I decide what we read next. Because we might all see The Rise of Skywalker, and then it's like, oh man, because of what I saw here, this book is totally what we need to read next. So I'm going to reserve my decision until after the film, and when we get close to the book club starting up again, I will do an announcement video to give you all time to pick up the book that we're going to read next. But continue to leave me your suggestions, but like I said, I'll probably decide after the movie comes out, and I'll probably do some polls and some other places with that then. But that's what I have for this week. Please leave me a comment. I'd love to know any of your thoughts on any of this, especially your thoughts on if Leia would she have ever been happy as a first senator? And if you're not already, please follow us on all of the socials. I'm always happy to talk to you guys any way I can. Joining the Discord is really the best way to continue to give feedback on what we should read next, but that's obviously not a requirement. And I will talk to you all next week for the final chapters of Bloodline.